All right, how are you? We're gonna come. We were in the Book of Psalms in the last video, and we're gonna dive into Proverbs, and we'll hit maybe a couple of things out of Proverbs. But I wanted to hit the women. I was like, when are you gonna say something about the women? Then you got the men saying, when are you gonna say something about the men? So I know after I do this one, the men are gonna beat me up pretty good. But I want to deal with. I would probably say, if I was to title this, maybe it would be Wife with an Excellent Spirit, or Wife who represent her household well, or something of that nature, but we'll figure it out when we get to the end of whatever God should say. But I'm going to deal with some truths here. They're not my truth, they're biblical truths. We're coming out of the book of Proverbs again. But it's amazing how society has changed in its perception of a woman and her role, a godly woman. And I don't mean that it has changed over several thousand years since the book of Proverbs 31 was written. But it seems to me it has changed. We're talking a vast amount of change in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It seems that in at least my lifetime, there was a portion of my life in which society could at least understand and affirm that the pattern of a wife with an excellent spirit in Proverbs, given in Proverbs 31. But over the years, society has moved so far from these principles that it may also be ludicrous to imagine a woman of these ethics in the 80s and 90s or the 2000s. Uh, you know, Fitting in the mold of this standard given in Proverbs 31. So, what kind of woman does our society honor? Who is the honored woman? Who was the honored woman of the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, what they would call the millennial time frame? Who is the prototype, woman? What does the modern superwoman look like? What does she look like? Well, if our society and our culture could design a woman, what would that woman be like? Let's see. If I can put all this together for you, we're going to try to put it all together in a nutshell. She would work on a job. She would build her own career. She would demand an equal pay with men. She would refuse to submit to her husband. Just if society put it together. Demand an equality with him in everything. Um, she would have an affair, what the world calls an affair, the Bible calls adultery. A divorce here or there, an abortion here or there. She would definitely exercise her independence. She would make sure that she was eminently fulfilled within herself. She would rely on her own resources. She would not want her husband or children to threaten her personal goals. She would have her own bank account. She would hire a maid or a cleaning service. She would eat out 50% of her time, and with her family or without them. She would make cold cereal or coffee to the standard breakfast of a fair family. We're talking about the woman that if society built the woman, quick frozen meals, uh, she would certainly expect her husband to do half the housework, which was notable. She would be tanned. Most women like to just go and just be tanned all the time. Coiffed, aerobicized. Some would even work out. She would be shopping to keep up with the fashion trends and make sure she could compete with the attention-getting contest. Most people want this attention. She would put her children, uh, in programs so that it would not interrupt her routine. She would be opinionated. She would demand to be heard from and eager to fulfill out her personal ambitions. The world would applaud her, and she wouldn't be able to stand uh, before anyone, stay married, or either be happy. And her kids would probably wander off or do things that they shouldn't do. This, if society built the woman and not God. Keep that in mind. But she would be the woman of that time, and she's a million miles away from the woman that God described in Proverbs 31. And people are saying, well, how did God describe the woman in Proverbs 31? I'm going to show you. I am going to show you. Now, do you understand that the book of Proverbs is a collection of wisdom that fathers and mothers were to give to their children? Do you understand that it was common in a Jewish family for a father to teach his sons the truth of this book? And not only a father, but a mother as well. For on several occasions it says, not to forsake the instructions of your mother. This was basically the composite of a practical manual for living life that Jewish parents had to teach their children. Now, one of the very most important things here children needed to learn was directed as young boys, and that was how to select the right woman. We got, the selection process is out of this world when it comes to men selecting women, because the men are not following the instructions of Proverbs. In fact, early on in the book in the Proverbs, young men are warned against the wrong kind of woman. The adulteress who flatters with her lips, the adulteress who forsakes her own husband, breaks covenant, and entertains a union with someone else. The adulteress whose lips drip honey, but whose brings about death and destruction. A smooth-tongued adulteress who hunts for the precious life to make him her prey. Proverbs warns against a noisy, loud woman, the quarrelsome woman who always wants to quarrel, the rebellious woman, the foolish woman. And the sons of Israel were to be warned to stay away from and avoid all such women. In chapter 12 of Proverbs, in verse 4, it says, "And a wife with an excellent spirit, or an excellent wife, is the crown of her husband. But she who shames him is a rottenness in her bones." To find the wife with an excellent spirit, stay away from anything else. And so the warnings have been given. In chapter 19, verse 14, it says, "There comes a hopeful truth." It says, "A prudent wife is from the Lord. A wise wife, a virtuous wife, a godly wife is a gift from God." So all the way through the marvelous book of wisdom, there's instructions about the kind of woman to avoid and to pursue the excellent woman, the wife with an excellent spirit, or the woman with an spirit, that she's a gift from God, or an excellent wife. It's interesting to me that the final chapter of Proverbs, in Proverbs chapter 31, that all the instructions given sort of climaxes at this point. And what you have in chapter 31 is the final lessons from a parent to a child. In this case, from a mother to her son. Verse 1 tells us that these are the words of King Lemuel. He wrote them down, but they are the oracle which his mother taught him. Here we have an unknown mother. We don't know anything about King Lemuel. This is the only time his name is ever mentioned. We don't know anything about his mother, but here is a Jewish mother who taught her son how to pick a woman, and a lot of other very important things as well. And this is her wisdom given to him. In verse 2, "What, O my son, and what, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows?" In other words, what do I say to you? How do I instruct you? What do I tell you? The first thing I tell you is, don't get involved in sexual immorality. Don't give your strength to women. That's what this means. Don't get involved in living in sexual misconduct. Then on down in verse 7 and following even down to verse 9, she says, "Stay away from drunkenness, strong drink. Take care of hurting people. Defend those who can't defend themselves. Stand by the oppressed. Support the needy. Deal justly with all people." And then she gives him a wide range of practical truth. But then she comes to the real issue of her heart, which passes on to us. "Most of all, my son, find a good wife." Find a good wife. Well, one that would do you good and not evil. Find a good wife. With her, you will spend your life. She will determine your earthly accomplishments. She will support the things you do. She will set the parameters of living and your influence. Find a good wife. And from verse 10 to 31, such a wife is described. The woman described here is of a priceless value. She has physical strength, she has mental strength, she has moral strength, And most of all, she has spiritual strength. But above all, she loves God deeply and reverently. She is characterized in this section in 6 different ways. I'm going to point them out to you. I love the way Proverbs speaks about a woman or a wife with an excellent spirit. Her character as a wife, her devotion as a homemaker, her generosity as a neighbor, her influence as a teacher, her effectiveness as a mother, and her excellence as a person. The sum of all this makes up a wife with an excellent spirit. And I might add that this is no woman in particular, but this is the woman that every woman should seek to emulate. She's rare. Look at verse 10. Wife with an excellent spirit. By the way, the word excellent in Hebrew means force, a woman of force, a woman of substance, a woman of strength would be another characterization of what I'm describing here. It's excellent in the sense of her strength, her spirituality, her being morally competent, mentally and physically. She is a woman of substance. She is a woman who is made in a dent in society. She impacts. She impresses. She leaves a mark in society. When she leaves, she'll leave a mark. She'll be known for her compassion for people. This is beautiful. There's a force about her life. She's not sharp-tongued. She's not brash. She's just smooth and peaceful and loving. This is the woman that she's telling her son to get. This kind of wife, he says, who can find this type? Very rare, hard to find this kind of woman. Mostly, I like to say, you can't find them. God has to bring them to you. Because when you go and pick, man always has a way of picking something that God didn't say. We'll make it into it. God said, no, if God says it, you won't even look for it. And there it is. We're going to look at chapter 20 and verse 6. Who can find such a trustworthy woman? I just want to put this in here because I don't want you to think that these things are out of balance. It's just as hard to find a trustworthy man at the level of God's standard of character, just as it is a woman. Now, we're going to deal with the men on the next video. I'm going to deal with the women now. But in chapter 20, verse 6, here we go. Typical men seek a wife for all the wrong reasons. All of them. They look for looks. They look for accomplishments. They look for style, success, money, education. All the wrong reasons. They should seek a woman of virtue, one of strength, one of character, one of spiritual excellence, one of internal good, not only being good, but godliness. Goodliness and godliness. Those are the right reasons. This kind of woman is a woman of force. She makes a difference. She leaves a mark. And in verse 10, it says her worth is far above jewels. No matter what precious jewels you have, she's far above it. Some would translate the word into rubies. Some would translate it into pearls. The Septuagint would translate into precious stones. In other words, she is more valuable than any earthly thing which we may deem valuable. She's a rare fortune, a rare find, a woman of force. What are her qualities, this rare woman? First of all, let's look at the character, as a wife or a woman of excellence, a wife with an excellent spirit. In verse 11, and without saying anything special concerning or about her, it talks about her husband to start with. They're very specific. The heart of her husband trusts in her. Now, obviously, the first thing we note about her character as a wife is that she can be trusted. Today, this is society. It's all messed up because most women can't, and this is nothing against all the women, but I'm saying, you're going to find that most men can't trust their wives. And it's balanced because most wives can't trust their men. But we're dealing with the wives right now. She's trustworthy. That is the kind of woman who allows her husband to do his work away from home, who allows her husband to go away for perhaps an extended time, and to do all of that is absolutely in confidence in her integrity and in her discretion. You got to have this, and her wisdom and her care for all of his interests. She cares about his interests. The implication here is that there's a substantial home to be cared for, a substantial resource of which she is the steward of. But he trusts her. He truly trusts her. The heart of her husband's trust in her. She has proven to be trustworthy. She is virtuous to the point where he has no jealousy. He has no fear. He has no suspicion. He has no anxiety. He knows that his care is her concern. His comfort is her passion. His burdens are her to relieve. His being at ease is her priority. And his house has become the home of his heart because he trusts in the one who leads that household, his wife. Integrity, discretion, wisdom, faithfulness, trustworthiness. That's what fills the husband of this woman so that he will have no lack of gain. No lack. In other words, she's not going to cause him to lose what he's working so hard to gain. She's a very careful steward of everything that he has. So let me tell you now, this sees the woman in the role of a Greek word, oikodespotis. To use Paul's word used in 1 Timothy 5, she's the ruler of the house. She manages the assets. She coordinates the activities. She is the steward of all that which he has provided, pretty much. And he has no lack of gain because of her stewardship, her management, her wisdom, and her care. And people say, man, my wife, she just loves to shop. She spend everything. That's not a good steward. That's not the one. But they got to be taught. Now that you have it, you got to teach it. And that frees him from everything that he can be in pursuit of for the bread for the family. And also freedom from anxiety. Because he knows whatever he brings in, she's going to care for it as a treasure. Whatever he brings to the table. Definitely she's in charge of the domestic matters. Using and accounting for the resources of his earnings. She's careful. She is wise. She is scrupulous. And he can leave home and never give it a thought. Never give it a thought that something's going to be messed up. Because he trusts her. He can give his whole heart to that which compels him in his profession, in his business, in his work, and know that all is cared for at home. Her character as a wife, she is totally trustworthy. She is a steward of everything that he provides for her. She's definitely on the receiving end of his provisions. And she cares for it as a precious treasure. This is exactly what God is saying. A woman with an excellent spirit, or a wife with an excellent spirit. Now let's look at verse 12. She does him good and not evil. She does him good. She always does what's best for him. No matter what, she does what's best for him. Why? He's her husband. Why would she do anything to harm him? Why would a woman do anything to harm her husband? She pursues his best interests. She strengthens him. She builds him up. She encourages him. She sees it as her role to do good to this man. He is providing for her, for all those that care in the home, the children, the household, whatever. If indeed this would include whatever he touches, she pretty much manages it. And he is providing all that is worthy of her best. He wants to give her the very best. That's where his heart's in. She will do him good and not evil. She never takes anything from him. His possessions, his resources, or his reputation. She never takes that from him. She wants to do him good and not evil. She never speaks evil of him so that those in the home would learn to distrust him or the testimony of his absence or his character. She does him good, not evil. She does everything to build him up. And then it adds, most interesting, to this note, all the days of her life. Isn't that interesting? All the days of her life, this is what she does. In other words, her love for him is based upon such high spiritual principles that it doesn't fluctuate with the circumstances of life. It does not fluctuate with how she feels. It does not fluctuate if there's a rift. It does not fluctuate if they have a disagreement. She is constant. When you get married, you no doubt have affirmed the vow that you will live together in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. And that's a vow that this woman keeps. Good times, bad times, weak times, strong times, sick times, well times, happy times, sad times, plentiful times, empty times. All the times, all her life, she will do him good, no matter what the time is. Like Sarah in 1 Peter, verse 3 and 6, she serves him as Lord. She reveals her virtue by her consistent service on his behalf. Her love is so deep, it has a purity and a power and a devotion that never, ever changes. His comfort, his success, his reputation, his joy, his fulfillment, his blessings are her delight. She's utterly unselfish. To live for him is her constant happiness. She knows she'll reap the benefit. Never unkind, always submissive in the most gracious way. And this is the essence of what Paul said when writing Titus 2 and 4. When he said, wives, love your husbands, do them good all your life, manage properly that which is in your care, so that they have no need of gain. The benefit to the husband is expressed in verse 23. Her husband is known in the gates when he goes and sits among the elders of the land. You know what that means? He's risen to the very top of the esteem of the people in the profession he chooses in life, because he is free to do so because of a dutiful and virtuous wife. She creates a world for him in which he can be everything God wants him to be. She's so faithful to the duties of her love that he is free to be all that he can be as a man of God. He is known in the gates. He is a well-known man. The implication here is that he is esteemed, he is honored, and he is respected. And that is because she has provided freedom from the things which tie him down and bind him so that he can be everything that he desires to be. That's her character as a wife or a woman with an excellent spirit, or a wife with an excellent spirit. Trustworthy, doing him good all the days of her life, seeing to it that her life is spent to see that he can be everything God would want him to be, to lead their household. That's an excellent woman. The underlying virtue there is selfishness. Their very selfless service, selflessness. That's the underlying virtue. It's just selflessness. She is consumed with him and offers herself in loving service to fulfill that desire. Secondly, not only her character as a wife in the excellent spirit makes her excellent, but her devotion as a homemaker. Now, being a homemaker is not a popular thing today. It really isn't. Being a housewife is somewhat of an illegitimate profession. It's like, don't say that. That's a bad word. But the most cruel and things take place today when homes are not pretty much managed and governed well, and there's children and people are left. Things are just neglected. But we're going to look at verse 13. But she's a ruler of the house. Okay. And we're going to start to look at this verse 13, and we're going to see the beauty of her role as it unfolds, managing and setting the tone for the home. She looks for wool. This is verse 13. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She expresses her ability with her crafts. In this case, she's making clothing, blankets, perhaps even curtains, or to cover an open space in the home that let the air in and the light in. She goes after wool. She looks for flax. The idea being she searches for the quality product. She brings home the wool used for clothing. That would be in the cold times. Flax used for linen will be worn in the warmer times and would be used for, specifically beautiful clothing that would wear at any season. She finds the very best that she can. She brings it back, okay, with the purpose of using her hands to turn it into clothing. You see, her submission and her godliness is what you got to see here. And her virtue and her relation to her husband do not make her into a religious recluse, pretending to be spiritual, when really being irresponsible. She is not defining laziness as spirituality. She is not shrinking the duties of the home. In fact, there's no place in this woman's life for self-indulgence. There's no place for laziness. There's no place for inactivity. She's full of energy. She is full of activity. She searches out the raw materials in order that she might work with her hands. It says she might work with her hands in delight. And that's the key. You see, she loves the family. She loves her husband. And it's the love of her heart that puts delight in her work. If she felt like the reason for her to live was to be fulfilling herself, then everything she had to do for someone else, she'd hate. She'd complain about. I'm always doing this. I'm always taking care of you. Those are complaining things because she knows her reason is to give herself of the joy and she loves. And she loves to delight in her heart and becomes delightful with her hands. When you're delightful, you're just delightful. The Syriac version translate that her hands are activity after the pleasures of her heart. No complaint. There's joy in the most menial tasks, and it's called the motive of love. And the love motive inside pushes the delight right into her hands. Self-denial is clearly behind the scenes. She's not concerned about her own pleasures. She's not concerned about the joy and delight of her, Her biggest thing is the delight of her family. It gives her joy. It gives her delight because she's consumed with the love for them. It's sacrificial love. She makes their clothes and all that they need, and she does it with joy. Verse 14 says, she is like merchant ships. She brings food from afar. She goes great distance to get food. She didn't just hop on the freeway and walk, and she would walk in order to get the best food for the best price in order to introduce variety into her family. Something beyond the local fare which could purchase in her own vicinity, she would travel to get the very best. She was obviously engaged in good planning and good management. She was a faithful steward of her husband's gain, and she would go as far as she needed to go and get what she needed for the family. Not just to provide food, but to provide in the variety of quality of the food that would truly express the love and delight from her heart. She wasn't just slapping something together and saying, well, that's all I had time to make for you, and just throwing it in front of them. She was involved in the process of going as far as she had to go to get what she thought was the very best for them and in what they would actually enjoy. Verse 15 says, she arises also while still in night and gives food to her husband and portions to him. It's wonderful here in Portugal. And typically in the East, a lamp is always burning in the house. A little terracotta lamp with oil in it and a little wick floating in the oil. And of course, the wick would only burn as long as there was oil there. Now, because most often they went to sleep when the sun went down, the oil would not last all night. And it was always the wife's responsibility to get up and sometimes after midnight, put more oil in the lamp that the family may sleep. Typically, the woman would arise sometime after midnight, put the oil in the lamp, keep it lit, and then begin to do the work that was required to feed the family that day. She had to grind the corn. She had to prepare all the day's meal. There were no fast food joints around. There was nowhere to go. You fed your family by the work of your hand and the sweat of your brow. It was hot in the part of the world for much of the year. Still, and the cool in the night was a wonderful time to do these things. And it was a quiet time at night. But it's still a major sacrifice. Okay? So she would grind the corn and do whatever she needed to do in order that when the family awoke just a few hours later, there would be food for them. That was her dedication. That was her commitment. Her household could enjoy the comfort while she made the sacrifice for their greater enjoyment. You see, she was more concerned with blessing and the joy of the people she loved than with her own indulgence. And then it says, and I love this thought, a portion. The word portion is quite interesting here. It probably means portion of work, not portions of food. Portions is task in the Septuagint that would use erga in Greek. It is translated labor in Exodus 5:14. So what she did was get up in the middle of the night, start her own work, and the maidens were her servants, in the household, also got up, and she appointed them to do tasks so that everybody was busy. She wasn't the only one working. And they were getting ready for the family and the household. Now, consumed with the needs of others, doing it with delight, she is every bit of a manager of the household. Now, to depreciate the role of a homemaker is pretty foolish. Okay, the breadth and the role of the homemaker is always amazing. To be able to be an economist, a steward of funds, and resources, to be able to analyze products availability, to be strong enough and well planned enough to make the right moves at the right time, to acquire the right things, to be fully a wife to your husband and a tender and loving mother to all your children, to apportion all these responsibilities to everyone who was part of the labor force in the home, that takes some special type of woman. Many would say, well, women have administrative skills. Well, why should they, get locked up in the house? Well, they don't understand. It can be the fullest and most wonderful expression of womanhood. That's why I'm excited, to actually just be able to share this. And we know now, at one point in time, this world was just saying, the man went to work and the woman stayed at home. And now you have now it takes a dual income just to actually be able to take care of your home and everything else. And the cost of living and this and that, the way society is set and ran today. But again, God is always able. He's more than able to take things, just like that overnight, and make everything abound in your way. And in verse 16, it says, it takes us even further into the enterprise of the woman. She considers a field and buys it from her earnings. She plants a vineyard. There's a field, perhaps adjacent to the property that the family owns. She's at the, she finds it at the right price, and it will be beneficial to the family. She buys it. There's a certain amount of independence here, okay? It doesn't say her husband bought it. She purchased it. She made the decision that it was wise. She pursued the option. Saying, well, now, wait a minute here. She bought that? Yeah, she bought it. And she also bought it from her earnings, okay? And planted a vineyard. That's right. Well, where did she get the money? Here's the question. She did, did she have a job? Was she out there working? Whatever. Let's look at verse 24. She makes linen garments and sells them, okay? And she supplies belts and girdles. She clothed, like cummerbunds, and that were used to wrap the robes around the folks in those days. And she sold them to the tradesmen. She made money. Literally, it's like Canaanites and the Phoenicians, the sailors of the ancient world who carried the goods all around. She had a little cottage, it was like just a little cottage there in the entryway. And the industry, wherever the industry was going or passing through, there she was. She made things with her hands. She made a little money. She never let the extra money get into the operational cash flow, but she kept it set apart. And she saw a judicious moment to purchase the field to benefit the family. She purchased it, planted the vineyard. She did that on her own. Wise steward, careful money manager, a good analyst. This is some woman that Proverbs is speaking of here. She makes wise investments, She assists her husband. She labors in the home. She takes the money that she has earned, on her own, making those things and invest in long-term investments for the benefit of her family and her children and grandchildren. She buys land and plants a vineyard. Wise woman. What can you say? Verse 17, she girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. The first statement, she girds herself with strength, expresses the energy or the force this woman has. It couldn't be translated. Strength is wrapped around her. She's a strong woman, strong discipline, strong in terms of commitment to the family, strong in love to her husband. I mean, she's strong. And then even her arms are strong, not because she goes to the gym, but her arms are strong because the effort exerted in the daily tasks. Her strength is a result of the effort. Her strength is a result of becoming a blessing to her family. Totally selfless. This is what comes pouring through this passage. Her humility, her selflessness, her love, the joy, the delight in everything that she does because she's lost in the love of her household. And in verse 18, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for you. She senses that her gain is good. In other words, when she gets the field and she plants the vineyard and the family prospers, she senses that it's good. In other words, as the Septuagint says, she makes a good profit. She sees that it's good for the family. She sees that it's beneficial. It has welfare provisions for them. It's for the well-being. And so the motives that she has is good. She's motivated by benefiting others. This is a woman of God's design. She's not motivated by self-fulfillment, self-esteem, self-glory, self-adulation. That's not her. No self-adulations here, not at all. She is totally motivated by seeing others benefit. That's the godly woman. Spurred on, not by ego, but by the fact that she sees what she sees, it's bringing good to others. So as a result, in verse 18, her lamp does not go out at night. She is so fulfilled in the benefit that's coming to others that it spurs her to work harder and harder and harder. It's amazing what people would do to indulge themselves. It's also frightening what people would not do, basically, to benefit others. If it doesn't benefit me, then I'm not doing it. And that's what goes around today. Her lamp goes not out at night. What does that mean? Because she is so pleased with the benefit of her work, she finds work for the hours of darkness, motivated totally by the goodness and the benefit of the work. She is utterly unselfish. What a woman. Verse 19, in those nights, perhaps when the lamp didn't go out, she stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. Elements of spinning, and the spindle, turning the wool and the flax into thread, and then taking the thread and turning it into cloth, then taking the cloth and cutting it into a pattern, then sewing it into garments to clothe the family. Spinning the wool, spinning the flax, making the scarlet, making the linen, making the purple garments. Now, all of this for someone else to be blessed. This was never for her. It was all for someone else. Encouraged. This is encouragement. Now, verse 21. Yeah, we got to wrap this up. Let's go. We're going to skip over verse 20 for a moment. She's not afraid of the snow, for her household. Did you know it snows in Jerusalem? Maybe 3 out of 5 years. It snows there. And even when it doesn't snow in the winter, it can be very, very cold because it's so high. Read 2 Samuel 23 around verse 20. It talks about the snow. But she's planned for it. She has actually planned for that. They didn't have heaters in those homes back then. The way they heated a room was with a pan of hot coals. They would take the pan of hot coals and sit it on the floor. And then they would huddle together around the warmth of blankets. But then They needed only warm blankets for sleep, but warm garments as well. So you got this pan in the middle, you got the blankets, and then you have blankets for sleep. You got to have the garments as well, because it was cold sometimes during the day. Often that the cold season, would last a long time. But she had no fear for the cold. She wasn't afraid of the snow for her household. For her household are clothed with scarlet. She had already taken care of everything, from the blankets to the clothing and everything. Why doesn't it say that they were clothed with wool? Well, we assume it was wool because that's the thing that will keep them warm. The scarlet is added to show that this woman has a touch of class. Normally, the wool wouldn't need to be colored or dyed, but she dyed it. She dyed it deep red in color because that was the color of elegance, and it still is, because it was beautiful. It was still dark, and dark clothes tend to keep the heat in better, but it was scarlet because there was something more beautiful, more dignified in the warmth, in the beauty of the color. She made them not just functional, but she made them lovely as well. And she planned far enough ahead so that she didn't have to worry at all when the cold came, because everything was ready. What a remarkable woman. Verse 22 adds a little something here. She makes covering for herself. Now, what that literally means is pillows, mattresses, bedding. She made bedding as well. Now, remember, she has to make all of this. She adorned all their beds with comfort and beauty and providing them for the comfort that they would enjoy. And again, behind this scene is love, and it's devotion, it's unselfishness, it's humility. It's the heart of a wife with an excellent spirit. This woman is up all night doing these things and preparing for the winter as well. Powerful. This woman's taking trips all over the place to get the things that she needs to make this happen. She's working her head off, planting vineyards. She's doing it all. She was doing it. There's just nothing I can say. She's going around, just doing it, making sure the husband's good, the kids are good, the house is good, the house is nice. It never looks messy. You can't. Who wouldn't brag about a woman like that? And God is literally bragging in Proverbs 31 on what a godly woman looks like. She's appreciative of the beauty with which God has adorned her with. She appreciates the love of her husband, and she wants to show him how much she cares and how much she wants to present herself to him in the beauty that God literally has had. Her clothing are fine linen and purple. That's lovely. No silk, and gold and pearls, and etc., etc. Just linen. Not particularly expensive, but the best. Paul said it in 1 Timothy, and Peter said it in 1 Peter in chapter 3. A woman's true adornment is her purity, her chaste character, her virtue, her godliness, her inner beauty. Inner beauty. She seeks to honor God, to honor her family, to honor her husband. And that just doesn't preclude her loveliness at all. For the thing that brings the delight and joy to everyone, she manages it all. She manages her family well, very well. She's a model and an example for Dorcas, who it says in Acts 9 and 36 was abounding with deeds and kindness and charity, which she continually did. And you remember when she died, the widow stood beside Peter weeping and showing all the tunics and garments Dorcas used to make while she was with them. She made all these clothes for poor people and widows, and that's the godly virtue of that woman. She stretched her hands to the needy, her generosity as a neighbor. She engulfed in her family, but she's not myopic, That's not all she sees in the world. It's not overdone. It's not isolationism. She cares about others, And this brings us to the fourth description of her influence as a teacher, which comes starting in verse 25 and then in verse 26. She is Her strength is her dignity in her clothing. She is garmented in strength and dignity. She smiles at the future. Strength has to do with spiritual character. Dignity has to do with class and quality. She's a woman of great character, strong and dignified. She has grace about her. She has confidence about her. She has a spirituality about her that really is just the foundations of her teaching. You see, you don't teach in a vacuum. You have to teach in a, someone say, well, you teach in a school or show up and say anything you want. No, you can't, So the teachings start with a platform of character in the home, or else you're teaching people to be hypocrites, and you surely don't want to give that lesson. When you demand your family to be what you're not, you're telling them it's really not important. Just do this. But this woman, of virtue, of joy, of love, of selfless service, she smiles at the future. She has no fear because she knows in whom she trusts. She's deeply spiritual. She knows whom she believes, whom she trusts. All things are in God's hands, and she has prepared elegantly for everything. It will be well in the future for her because she's right with God. It will be well in the future for her household because all things are in order. And then there's the teaching in verse 26. She opens her mouth in wisdom. She guides her family daily in wisdom. I believe the father is to be the teacher in the home. I believe he is the family priest. But I do not believe for one moment that precludes the reality that it is the mother who, day in and day out, hour in and hour out, is teaching wisdom to the children. Not formal classes, but instructions in the flow of life. She's the teacher. Men, we may give the formal lessons, but day in and day out, she's the teacher. And in what attitude does her teaching come? And you have it in verse 26. The wisdom of God comes out of her mouth, and the law of kindness is on her tongue. The Torah of loving kindness is of her tongue. The attitude in which she teaches all, it's a dominant attitude of loving kindness. What a speech, ministering grace to the hearers, as Paul said, edifying and building up, not tearing down. The greatest teacher becomes the character of life. It makes her so believable because the wisdom of God is true. And because the attitude is compassionate and gracious, there's no other teacher like it. What a portrait. This is a challenge for most women in this lifetime. And I say to you in Proverbs 31, God has set such a bar on the woman to match up to this. Is it attainable? Yes. Do they exist? Yes. Is this a knock against women? No. But this is what God says about a wife with an excellent spirit. I'll leave you with this one. Blessed is this woman for her effectiveness as a mother. Verse 27 sums it up, her leadership in the house. It's saying she looks well to the ways of her household. In other words, she exercises constant surveillance over it. She manages the children well, all the resources well, all the household. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. In other words, she is not eating the product of laziness. She's eating the product of effort. She worked hard at it. She has the real satisfaction that comes from a supreme effort. She surveys the household. She has it under control. She meets every need. And it implies that her children are all in all. Verse 28 reads this. Her children rise up and they bless her. They reverence her. They honor her. And they hold her in high esteem. Because one, they see how she loves their father. They see how she loves her husband. They see how he's blessed and able to do and provide. They see how she never says anything negative to them about her husband. She does not teach divisiveness in the home. She's a virtuous, trustworthy woman. Go with God and go in peace. And I tell you, it's beautiful. Proverbs 31 is always beautiful. But blessed is the woman who desires, who everyone missed the mark. But God has a measuring rod. And this is the wisdom of the Proverbs here. So until we meet again, God bless you.